you didn't pay them back.
Yes, in ancient times, if you did not pay back a debt, then you could be taken and thrown into a place called debtor's prison, and you'd be in there until your debt was paid off. You'd actually have to labor in the prison, and that's what Jesus meant when he said, "Surely you'll come out, you'll not come out of there until you paid up the last cent." When he talks about
Wow.
being thrown in prison.
So, it's really important, that the culture was different back then to understand their culture and what those people had to go through.
Yes. All right, guys, remind me to answer Brian Oliveira's question about the gates of Hades. Catholics and Orthodox use that scripture where Jesus says the gates of Hades will not prevail against his church to prove that there must always be a church establishment on the earth, a visible church.
Yeah, I've
And
heard that argument too a lot.
yes, do you guys know the response?
You guys answered it in the first call.
Did we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Nolan, I believe it was Nolan who answers it. The first ever call.
do you remember the response, Dante? Was it satisfactory?
I think I wrote it down somewhere, but I think it was something towards the line that Jesus won't leave his saints in Hades. Like, they'll
Yes,
be resurrected.
that's all it means. Well, I'm not sure what to talk about first. Either answer that. I just meant to come back to it. But here, let's just finish
Are
talking
we
about
gonna
being
read?
indebted. Oh yeah, we also got to read Sirach. But I will just say about debts. We were talking about that, and I started recording. But guys, avoid all debts. Avoid being indebted to people. Avoid getting loans on things. If you are going to get a loan, try to pay it off as quickly as possible. Because even though we don't have debtor's prison anymore, that was abolished in the United States and in a lot of places around the world. Nevertheless, to owe a debt, it really ties your hands and makes you somebody's servant, even though you don't have to go to prison if you don't pay it back. Nevertheless, you're still severely limited in life, and you just can't function as freely as you ought to, and you just can't be productive. You can't serve God as much as you ought to because of this loan you took out. So be careful about owing big debts. It makes us slaves of corporations and things. Yes. Well, let me answer this real quick, Ray. I just want to mention for Brian here that not only is it true that Jesus is talking about the resurrection, that's the most obvious thing, but Catholics make a horrible argument here, Catholics and Orthodox. And by the way, it's a self defeating argument whenever the Catholics and Orthodox say it, because they're saying, no, there must be a visible, obvious church. And yet, how are we supposed to know who is the right visible, obvious church, the Catholics or the Orthodox? We have a choice between two churches. And if we choose one of them, the other group says, what? How dare you choose them? We are the obvious ones. And you're like, oh, sorry, I'll choose you then. Then the other one says, no, it was us. We're the real church. How dare you? How stupid are you to not see which one is the obvious visible church? See, they've excommunicated each other. So already you have this problem where even if it were true that this is talking about the Catholic or the Orthodox Church, it's still not obvious which one is obviously the real church. You have to become some kind of very well studied person to learn which of those churches is true. So we can't rely on their authority, their claim to authority, because they would both make an equal claim of being the real church. They'd say, you have to obey us, or you're not in the real church, and you're not Christians, and you're not going to be saved. Well, the only thing I can do is go and study church history. But if I go and study church history, I'm not going to become a Catholic or an Orthodox. I'm going to see how many heresies they've invented. Also, we would point out that for the church to be visible, where does it have to be visible? If you're saying that there has to be an organized institutional church somewhere on the earth, I would just ask them, where does the church have to be visible? Answer that question. If I go in my closet right now and close the door, is the church visible to me anymore? You Catholic or Orthodox? Cathodox, that's what I'm going to start calling them because it's easier. Just combine them into one mutated creature. So if I go in my closet, is the church visible? They say, of course not. You need to go outside. I see. So the church isn't everywhere. The church is not on, you don't have a Catholic or Orthodox church on every street corner, do you? No. Okay, maybe you got one or two in each town. Maybe you have some towns that don't have any Orthodox church. Like I live in a town, there is no Orthodox church in the town I live. I'd have to travel to find it. So is the church invisible? No, I have to go to where it is. Where is the Catholic or Orthodox church in China? Christianity is illegal in China, guys. That's a massive nation. Do you know how many people are in China? China population 1.4 billion people. Okay, that's a massive percentage of the Earth's population. You guys know there are no Orthodox or Catholic churches in China. I mean, they have a communist church there. They call it the Communist Catholic Church. It's a joke. I mean, even the Catholics know it's a joke. They require that they have a picture of their god emperor at the back of the church. Everybody pay respect to it and all that. It's even the Catholics know that's not a real church. I mean, Christianity, even according to the Catholics or Orthodox standard, is completely illegal in China. So is the church invisible in China? But you Catholics, I thought that the gates of Hades couldn't prevail against God's church. What about in Saudi Arabia, guys? Where's the Catholic church there? It's not there, guys. It's invisible in Saudi Arabia. What about Africa? You guys know that the Orthodox didn't even start evangelizing in Africa until the 20th century, last century. They didn't even care to go and evangelize there. And now they have some churches there, but I mean in Africa, like West Africa, South Africa, I mean just not very many Orthodox churches there. So is the church invisible there? Yeah, it's invisible. The church always has been. It's been veiled. You may have visible institutions, but those who are real Christians, those who are really faithful to God, which may God find us to be so on Judgment Day. I'm not even saying we are. May God judge us to be that. Those people who are true Christians are invisible. They are veiled. Christ's church is veiled. And it's no coincidence that the same people who deny the necessity of a wife being veiled are also the ones denying that Christ's church is veiled. They say, no, she's open for everybody to see. She's like a prostitute. Everybody can just see her. She just shows off. Christ's bride would never be veiled. Never. That's what we hear from these Catholics who insist that the church be perfectly visible and out in the open. No, she's enclosed.
So wouldn't that go into the argument of like what do they consider like a church? Is it the believers themselves or is it the building?
That's a
Because I
good
remember,
question. What do you remember, Raheem?
yeah, I remember like listening to a debate where the a Orthodox person was saying that they don't like the word like when you say is the church you're insinuating that the church is a building. They don't like that. But then I watched the video on Hermes's channel the on the guy who was
Yes.
showing off the church. He was like, no, we have to decorate the church, because it's God's building. We have
Yes.
to have a $2 million floor because
Yes.
Jesus. So, what do they believe about the church?
Raheem, they do believe that the church is a building. It's that simple. They are just like the Protestants. Orthodox and Catholics are just like Protestants in so many ways. Well, they protest the early church, so they are Protestant by definition. They think the early church is stupid and that Christianity had to be developed over time. They believe that there had to be a reformation and that the Catholics needed to reform early Christianity and set them right. They just believe the Reformation that got Christianity correct this time, they believe that happened before Martin Luther. So they are Protestants. Yes, they definitely believe it's a building, just like Josiah Trenham said in that Orthodox video. Aramis made a great video on the subject where Josiah Trenham, just like all the other priests, said this building is part of the God's church. I mean, it is part of God's kingdom. He said. He says this is the most important building in your whole life. This is the most important place in the whole world. Is this church? And he called it a temple too, multiple times. They call their buildings temples, even though the early church unanimously says they don't have physical temples. They only have their bodies. That is the temple that we worship God in. But we'll put together a bunch of quotes on that and have a call on that sometime soon. I just wanted to answer that. And just in case anybody is curious and says, where are these quotes? Where the church fathers specifically say that gates of Hades not prevailing against the church is only referring to the resurrection. we can show some quotes here. But the early church, when they interpreted this verse where Jesus says, "The gates of Hades shall not prevail against my church," the Orthodox take that to mean that, well, it's so ambiguous, isn't it? I mean, what do the gates of Hades have to do with us surviving the church's apostasy? I mean, such a strange thing, because he doesn't say Satan won't prevail. He says the gates of Hades. What are the gates of Hades? Do you guys know what the gates of Hades? I mean, those are literally just the gates that lead into Hades, the place where the souls are of the dead and of Christ's church, those Christians who died faithfully and who are waiting for the resurrection. Jesus says, the gates are not going to prevail against my church, meaning even though my church should die, those gates are not going to remain powerful over my church. My church is going to rise again. My church is going to pass through those gates and be resurrected. Those gates will not remain closed. Let's see if this interpretation of mine here is some new interpretation, or if you can find it both in the pre and post-Nicene church. In fact, I think post-Nicene quotes on this subject are even more powerful than pre, because we know the Catholics don't accept the pre-Nicene quotes. But here's Hippolytus. He says, the jailers of Hades trembled when they saw him, Jesus, and the gates of brass and the bolts of iron were broken. For look, the only begotten, God the Word, had entered Hades with a soul among souls. So he says, those jailers of Hades, the angels, the demons, they trembled when they saw Jesus, because they saw the gates of Hades, the gates of brass and bolts of iron, broken. Could this be referring to Christ prevailing, destroying those gates? Those gates did not prevail against Christ. Christ entered and then departed, and those gates did not have any power over him, nor will they have power over the souls of his righteous dead, the church. Here's Ephraim. This is now a post-Nicene quote. He says, for if he was not a man, whose side was opened by a lance, and there came out blood and water? And if he were not God, who has broken the gates of hell and burst the iron bars? And by whose command did the dead that slept in their graves come forth? See, Jesus has the authority to tell anybody, like Lazarus, come forth. And he did this with multiple people, caused them to simply leave Hades. So he has authority over the dead. Jesus was already demonstrating that, and that's exactly what John Chrysostom is about to say. So the church was already triumphing over Hades at that time, and it will triumph much more on the day of Jesus' return. Here's John Chrysostom. He says, but that my meaning may yet be plainer, let me illustrate it from the actual case. He, Jesus, raised up Lazarus by a single word merely, and showed him alive. Again he said, the gates of Hades shall not prevail against the church. And he that forsakes father or mother shall receive 100-fold in this life, and shall inherit everlasting life. The miracle, then, is one, the raising of Lazarus, but the predictions are two, made evident, the one here, the other in the world to come. Consider now how they are all proved by one another. For if a man disbelieve the resurrection of Lazarus, from the prophecy uttered about the church, let him learn to believe the miracle. So you guys see how the prophecy is connected with the miracle of Lazarus, according to John Chrysostom. He says, for the word spoken so many years before came to pass then, and received accomplishment, for the gates of Hades prevailed not against the church. So you guys see, in their understanding, gates of Hades not prevailing against the church has nothing to do with the church leaders never falling into apostasy. They never even mention that subject. That's not what Jesus is talking about. But they're great at twisting scripture, those Protestants, the Cathodox. Here's Pseudo-Athanasius. Again, the Catholics and Orthodox think that this is Athanasius, but some people doubt it, so I just put Pseudo-Athanasius in here. Again, it's them that's saying it is Athanasius, though, so they should accept it. He says, remember the 12th hour, because in this hour our Lord descended to Hades, and seeing him, Hades shuddered and was astonished, saying, who is this who descends in authority and great power? Who is this who shatters the bronze gates of Hades and crushes the steel bars? Who is this who descends from heaven and is crucified, and yet is not subject to me, death? Who is this who loosens the chains of those under my power? Who is this who by his own death destroys me, death? Now, guys, in ancient times, people personified death. They used to call it a person, like an actual living power, death. It's kind of funny to call it a living person. But it says in the book of Revelation that death and Hades are thrown into the lake of fire. So it's talking about God destroying these things. But notice how they keep on referencing Psalm 107. That's because God even talks about this very event of Jesus going into Hades and destroying the gates. He talks about it in the Psalms. Let's read Psalm 107 or 116. It's numbered as 117 in the Masoretic text. So here is David. He says, "For he satisfied, God satisfies the empty soul and fills the hungry soul with good things. Even them that sit in darkness and the shadow of death, fettered in poverty and iron." So it's talking about those people who have died. Their souls are now sitting in the shadow of death. That's talking about Hades. And it says they're fettered. That means they have chains on them, spiritual chains. Because they rebelled against the words of God and provoked the counsel of the Most High. So their heart was brought low with troubles. They were weak, and there was no helper. Then they cried to the Lord in their affliction, and he saved them out of their distresses. And he brought them out of darkness and the shadow of death, and broke their bonds asunder. Let them acknowledge to the Lord his mercies, and his wonders to the children of men. For he broke to pieces the brazen gates, and crushed the iron bars. For he helped them out of the way of their iniquity, for they were brought low because of their iniquities. Their soul abhorred all meat, and they drew near to the gates of death. Then they cried to the Lord in their affliction, and he saved them out of their distresses. He sent his word and healed them and delivered them out of their destructions. Let them acknowledge to the Lord his mercies and his wonderful works to the children of men. So this is written in the Old Testament, and it is a prophecy about Jesus, his word, going down and healing them and saving them from their destructions. So you guys notice, gates of death, they were in the gates of death, but then he broke the brazen gates. Guys, this is what it's talking about, that the gates of Hades will not prevail against his church, because he destroyed the gates. Hopefully that makes sense to you, Brian, when you hear this, and anybody else who's watching this later. Makes sense, everybody? Makes sense, Dante?
Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I was just wondering, what's the topic of this call?
I hadn't actually planned anything, but Brian asked a question about the gates of Hades. He was asking, what does it mean? Because the Catholics and Orthodox are always asking that question. Jesus says the gates of Hades will not prevail against his church. So does that mean the church can never fall away into apostasy? But Jesus is not talking about the church falling away into apostasy. He's talking about the souls of the dead being stuck in Hades. And Jesus is saying they're not going to be stuck there. Those gates are not going to remain closed on them. They're going to come out.
Right.
Yes, and don't listen to anybody who tells you the gates of Hades is talking about a physical location that Jesus visited on the surface of the earth, like they made in The Chosen. Oh, man. You guys seen this in The Chosen, where they go to this place called the Gates of Hades? It's a temple. Anyway, that's very silly. It's not what's being talked about here. This is talking about the actual place where the souls go. Okay. Well, we're actually just going to read some Sirach, guys. Shall we read? We're on chapter 34.
What is the Sirach?
Wisdom of Sirach. I'm reading RSV.
Is this in the Bible?
Yes, it is. It's one of the most quoted books by all the church fathers.
Why is that, sir?
Well, because it's a book of great wisdom. They quote the Psalms and the Proverbs and Sirach so frequently, it's like nonstop. Many church fathers,
Okay.
even Paul quotes from Sirach, and even Paul also quotes from Wisdom of Solomon. And these books are definitely prophetic of Christ. Sirach 24, super prophetic of Christ. There are two things that we would ask for, two things we rely on as proofs that something is an inspired text, really is God breathed. It would be, the first one is that it prophesies Christ. If it does, then clearly that's God breathed. And the second thing that we would consider an indicator of its divine inspiration is that the church always considered it as divinely inspired and always quotes from it and calls it scripture. And that would be true about the pre-Nicene and the post-Nicene church. And in case anybody is hesitant to believe such a thing, if that doesn't give you enough confidence, also know that the Jews considered it scripture. They included it in the Septuagint, and it's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And if that still isn't enough confidence for you that scripture, that the Jews and the Christians, the apostles quote from it, and that the pre-Nicene and post-Nicene church quote from it constantly, just so you know, even to this day, the majority of Christians have this book in their Bible, because the majority of Christians are Catholics and Orthodox, and they have it in their Bibles. So anybody who would not consider it scripture is in the minority and always has been. Okay, if you got confidence, let's read it and let the book speak for itself. We're on chapter 34. This is the book of Jesus, the son of Sirach. He says, "A man of no understanding has vain and false hopes, and dreams give wings to fools. As one who catches at a shadow and pursues the wind, so is he who gives heed to dreams. The vision of dreams is this against that, the likeness of a face confronting a face. From an unclean thing, what will be made clean? And from something false, what will be true? Divinations and omens and dreams are folly, and like a woman in travail, the mind has fancies." I think he means in the same way that a woman, when she's in travail, is like in a different state of mind. He's saying that dreams are like that. Yeah, it is an amazing thing just how worked up a woman gets when she's giving birth. I've witnessed it 3 times with my wife, and I guess, I was kind of there when my mother was giving birth to my siblings, but not in person, not watching or anything. But yes, it's just amazing how painful childbirth is. It's like, it's overwhelmingly painful. It's unbelievably painful. And then when it's over, it's like, oh, it's over. It's like you're in a totally different state of mind. Yes, he says, unless dreams are sent from the Most High as a visitation, do not give your mind to them. For dreams have deceived many, and those who put their hopes in them have failed. Without such deceptions, the law will be fulfilled, and wisdom is made perfect in truthful lips. And the church fathers agree with this. The church fathers say, don't worry about dreams, and don't think that in a dream you're able to sin. We do feel tempted to sin in dreams, but the real temptation is to sin when you wake up from a dream, especially if we're being tempted to lust. But dreams are just empty fantasies that our soul conjures up, and we are not in control of ourselves into dreams, or inside dreams.
What if it's like a lucid dream?
I mean, I have had many dreams where I thought I was lucid, and then when I woke up, I had no idea why I was doing what I was doing. Dreams can make perfect sense when you're in the dream, and then you wake up and you say, I have no idea why I thought that made sense. But as Tertullian says, you will no more be punished for something that you did in a dream than you will be rewarded for some righteous thing you did in a dream. If you suffer martyrdom in a dream, you're not going to receive the martyr's crown when you wake up. It's just imagination. And you should also...
That's good, because I've been having some like really bad dreams lately for whatever reason. And
Well,
I didn't know if like you could actually like sin in your dreams, since it's not really you that's like conscious.
well, God knows everything, and when you wake up, if you've woken up and actually committed a sin, that's different. But dreams can be inflicted by demons. Even though Tertullian says what he says, he also says that demons sometimes try to attack us in dreams because they can't get us while we're awake. They attack us when we're asleep.
I see.
Do they commonly have meanings, or is that just specifically chosen people as seen in the Bible?
Well, that's exactly why Sirach said what he said. He says they don't have meanings. He says, a man of no understanding has vain and false hopes, and dreams give wings to fools. So he's saying fools become very bold to go and do things because they had a dream that told them something. and it makes a fool feel like he's on a mission now. Oh, my dream told me this. But he says if anybody gives heed to dreams, they're like somebody who catches at a shadow or pursues the wind. The vision of dreams is just this against that. The likeness of a face, confronting a face. You're saying no. That's nothing true about it. From something false, what can be made true? They're all folly. They're foolishness. Don't be giving heed to dreams. There are some people, some denominations, for some reason it's Pentecostals in my experience, who put a lot of emphasis on dreams, always wanting to tell everybody the dreams they're having, and they're just empty. A dream can certainly talk about, I mean, it can show you what you're thinking about in your subconscious. It can show that you're nervous about something. They've done psychology on dreams, that people tend to have certain dreams like, showing up in a gathering like, without wearing clothes or something and then being embarrassed. That's an indication that you're very nervous about something in life. I've had that. I would get those when I was very nervous, when I was about to have to go do something, that I would have dreams like that. But it's not real. It's just saying that your mind is preoccupied with some thought. It doesn't actually mean anything. The church fathers say there's some indicators that tell you that a dream is truly from God. One of the most obvious ones is that the dream repeats. In the scriptures, we see many men like Nebuchadnezzar or the king of Egypt receiving the same dream multiple times, not just once, to indicate that it is from God. Now, a Christian doesn't need their dream to be given them multiple times because they'll actually have an angel go and speak to them or God speak to them. But those less righteous men are not worthy to hear God speak to them directly. So they'll receive some symbolic dream, and they'll receive it multiple times in order to bother them enough that they know it's no normal dream, and it's from
I mean,
God.
I've had a reoccurring bad dream.
Yeah, but it has to be like the exact same dream with all the same details.
No, yeah.
You have to
Does
tell
that
me what
mean
that is
something,
sometimes.
or does it have to be like a good related thing?
Well, I mean, a dream can be bad and be from God.
Wait, Luke, can a dream be from a demon?
Yes, I was just saying that. Yes, was that you, John?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
Yes. Dreams can be from demons. Okay, let's keep reading Sirach here, guys. We should put together a list of quotes from the church fathers on dreams. But the message here is do not be somebody who gives heed to their dreams and who thinks they've got some kind of message from a dream. God will make it very clear when there's a dream from Him. It will stand out very much. It will feel like you have received some massive message. It will be bugging you a lot. But we all have weird dreams. Everybody has weird dreams, and not all dreams are from God. Yeah, the church fathers do give some even some specific details of how to know when a dream is from God, and I don't remember all of them. I need to read it again. We should put that together. Okay, here.
That'd be a fun video to.
Yes, I agree. I mean, that's a good instruction on such an abstract topic. All right, he continues. An educated man knows many things, and one with experience will speak with understanding. He that is inexperienced knows few things, but he that has traveled acquires much cleverness. I have seen many things in my travels, and I can understand more than I can express. I have often been in danger of death, but have escaped because of these experiences. He's saying the experiences helped him. The spirit of those who fear the Lord will live, for their hope is in Him who saves them. He who fears the Lord will not be timid, nor play the coward, for He is his hope. Blessed is the soul of the man who fears the Lord. To whom does he look, and who is his support? The eyes of the Lord are upon those who love Him, a mighty protection and strong support, a shelter from the hot wind and a shade from noonday sun, a guard against stumbling and a defense against falling. He lifts up the soul and gives light to the eyes. He grants healing, life, and blessing. If one sacrifices from what has been wrongfully obtained, the offering is blemished. The gifts of the lawless are not acceptable. The Most High is not pleased with the offerings of the ungodly, and he is not propitiated for sins by a multitude of sacrifices. Like one who kills a son before his father's eyes is the man who offers a sacrifice from the property of the poor. The bread of the needy is the life of the poor. Whoever deprives them of it is a man of blood. To take away a neighbor's living is to murder him. To deprive an employee of his wages is to shed blood. Well, I'm saving this. I'm saving this because in the early church, they specifically command in various books, such as Apostolic Constitutions, that we are not to receive any donations from wicked people, and that God will not accept those. But if you go on any one of these, well, if you go to any Catholic or Orthodox church, you'll see that they accept donations from anybody who comes over. They make no distinction about who is giving gifts to the church. And they even go on their websites, they make these little places where anybody can donate. And they receive bribes and they become biased and evil. But in the church, and even here in Sirach, it says God doesn't want gifts from evil people. He will not be propitiated. He wants you to be repentant and penitent.
Luke, how do
Yes.
you make that distinction though? Because you also said about giving alms to sinners. Isn't anyone that's not in the faith a sinner then?
Yes, that's true. But think about a situation where a person is penitent and repentant, and they may not be a Christian. They may even be very ignorant. But that person is a truly poor and humble person. And you can help that person with a clear conscience. You can give them the gospel, which is the most loving thing you can do. You should not
Mm.
just give somebody some food and say, oh, I'm so righteous. I gave him some physical food, but I know he's going to hell, and I'm not going to say anything. You need to give him the knowledge he needs. That's food too. That's essential food. It's one thing to give to somebody like that, and it's another for some guy to come to you. Some guy who actually has a job, he makes money, but he also likes to waste his money because he gambles, or he buys video games, or he buys extravagant food and he's fat. And then let's say one day this guy, you find out he's low on money and he needs to pay a bill. And he says, hey man, can you help me pay a bill? That guy you should not help. You shouldn't give him a penny.
Is that not your neighbor?
Yes, we should love our neighbor, but we also we're not going to get any reward for giving to someone who's not in need. And the poor in Scripture are beggars. It's somebody who's truly destitute, not just some guy who has some money and wastes his money.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the Scripture it tells you do not give your bread even to this. Don't give your bread to a sinner. And Paul, when he goes over the list of requirements that a widow must meet in order to be supported by the church's funds, Paul goes through a massive list of requirements. He says she has to be 60 years old. I mean, that alone is such a huge requirement. You're not going to help a woman who's 59 years old? But Paul says she has to meet these requirements. Otherwise, she needs to go take care of herself. Or she needs to tell her family to take care of her children. And then Paul says, and if her children won't take care of them, they're to be excommunicated. And then if her grandchildren don't take care of them, they're to be put out of the church too. So children, grandchildren, she needs to be 60 years old at least. She needs to have been the wife of one husband. She can't have had multiple marriages, or else the church will not help her. Period. And that means, even if she's starving, they will not help her. And she also needs to be somebody who is taking care of people in the church. Says she needs to have washed the saints' feet, taking care of visiting strangers. She needs to just be, he says, full of good works. But the church does not offer to help people who are evil. Now, if some evil person, guys, broke into my house and stole something from me, I am required to give it to him, like Jesus said. If somebody's stealing from me, I give it to him. That's our testimony to every person who would mistreat us, that we do a kindness for every evil thing that is done to me. But I don't go around just wanting to give all of my belongings to evil people. I'm not like hunting down robbers or murderers to try to give my stuff to them. But I am supposed to love them in response to any evil thing they do to me. But read the scriptures and read where it says you're cursed if you give to a rich person. You're not blessed for giving to just anybody. You do have to give to the right person. In the Didache, it says that. Let your alms sweat in your hand until you find somebody who's worthy. But we did have a huge call on alms, and I think we went into it in enough depth that you can see we don't give to people indiscriminately. Unless it's a brother. And now, of course, that's a certain amount of discrimination. But if you guys have a brother who is in need, you do not make any inquiry about his situation. You'll say, have you been wasting money lately? If your brother says, I need money, can you please help me? Then you give it to him. It's different with a brother. You should read those quotes, David, if you haven't already. We had a big call on it. You guys, if you give money to wicked people, you're not going to have any money to give to people who are really in need, who are righteous, who deserve it. But this is in line with what was just said here. God does not accept sacrifices from evil people. It's not even going to be counted to their favor. God's not going to say, "Oh, you wicked person, you've propitiated me because you gave some donation to the church or something, to the priest." God is going to say, "You're a wicked person." And he tells them, "Don't even receive a gift from a wicked person." You guys know that in the scriptures that it says, if a person obtained money from usury, from charging other people interest, he brings that money to God. God does not accept it. Or if a harlot gets paid for being a harlot and she brings that money to God, God does not accept it. And it goes for many other sins. God doesn't want the money that people got from sinning. If you've been a drug addict for years and then you go and sell your expensive house and use your money to build some ministry, God doesn't want any of that money. Not that you'd be in a real Christian belief anyway. It's all rejected. God has strict rules. Yeah, you would think, or I would think, that if a prostitute had made a bunch of money, I would think, the way that we would think about it logically, we'd say, well, she should make up for all her prostitution by taking all that money she got from being a prostitute and giving it to the poor. Yeah, yeah. But God says, man, I would rather you just completely not make any use of it at all. It's unclean in God's sight. It's all just disgusting. Go and make money from an honest trade. Don't be a gambler. Yeah. Well, enough said on that. You should watch what the church says on that subject. But I will say one more thing, though. The church did say if they received money from some wicked person, they would burn it all. Okay, let's keep going. This is verse 23 of Sirach. When one builds and another tears down, what do they gain but toil? When one prays and another curses, to whose voice will the Lord listen? If a man washes after touching a dead body and touches it again, what has he gained by his washing? So if a man fasts for his sins and goes again and does the same things, who will listen to his prayer? And what has he gained by humbling himself? Yep, we should not be double-minded. Here's Sirach 25. He who keeps the law. By the way, guys, whenever the scriptures talk about the law, we know that this was written in the Old Testament, and so for them it applied to the Old Covenant law, but we live in the New Covenant law, and so we are to read the scriptures in a spiritual way. When we hear it talking about the law, we are to think about the law of Christ. And when we think of sacrifices, we are not to think of burnt offerings and animal sacrifices. We are to think of the spiritual sacrifices that we make to God, which are the sacrifices of praise and of almsgiving and of the Eucharist. These are the spiritual sacrifices. All right, he says, he who keeps the law makes many offerings. He who heeds the commandments sacrifices a peace offering. He who returns a kindness offers fine flour, and he who gives alms sacrifices a thank offering. To keep from wickedness is pleasing to the Lord, and to forsake unrighteousness is atonement. Wow, guys, you see the wisdom of Jesus, son of Sirach, that he says all these things, like keeping the law, is equivalent to these sacrifices. Keeping commandments is a sacrifice of a peace offering. Returning a kindness, that's an offering of fine flour. He's actually telling you what these things symbolize. And he who gives alms sacrifices a thank offering. So he's already leading people up to understanding the spiritual meaning of the law and coming out of the bare letter of it. All right, do not appear before the Lord empty-handed, for all these things are to be done because of the commandment. The offering of a righteous man anoints the altar, and its pleasing odor rises before the Most High. The sacrifice of a righteous man is acceptable, and the memory of it will not be forgotten. Glorify the Lord generously, and do not stint the first fruits of your hands. With every gift show a cheerful face, and dedicate your tithe with gladness. Give to the Most High as he has given, and as generously as your hand has found. For the Lord is the one who repays, and he will repay you sevenfold. I'm going to save this too. This I'm saving for a different reason, just because the Orthodox still think that we should be offering things like incense and such. Let me also just say up here, I make notes. I'm sorry, guys. This is what I always do. When you guys are reading, you take notes too. Okay, we're back to it. Excuse me. Sorry. All right. Here is the next verse. Verse 12. Sirach 35. Do not offer him a bribe, for he will not accept it, and do not trust to an unrighteous sacrifice. For the Lord is the judge, and with him is no partiality. He will not show partiality in the case of a poor man, and he will listen to the prayer of one who is wronged. He will not ignore the supplications of the fatherless, nor the widow when she pours out her story. Do not the tears of the widow run down her cheek, as she cries out against him who has caused them to fall? He whose service is pleasing to the Lord will be accepted, and his prayer will reach to the clouds. The prayer of the humble pierces the clouds, and he will not be consoled until it reaches the Lord. He will not desist until the Most High visits him and does justice for the righteous and executes judgment. Well, if you guys have a righteous prayer style, you'll keep on praying until you've received the answer, until it pierces the clouds. The Lord will not delay, neither will he be patient with them, till he crushes the loins of the unmerciful and repays vengeance on the nations, till he takes away the multitude of the insolent and breaks the scepters of the unrighteous, till he repays man according to his deeds, and the works of men according to their devices, till he judges the case of his people and makes them rejoice in his mercy. Mercy is as welcome when he afflicts them as clouds of rain in the time of drought. There's a lot of instruction here. You guys have any comments before I go to the next one? Okay, I'm going to the next one. Here's Sirach 36. Have mercy upon us, O Lord, the God of all, and look upon us, and cause the fear of you to fall upon all the nations. Lift up your hand against foreign nations, and let them see your might. As in us you have been sanctified before them, so in them be magnified before us, and let them know you as we have known, that there is not God but you, O Lord. Show signs anew, and work further wonders. Make your hand and your right arm glorious. Rouse your anger and pour out your wrath. Destroy the adversary and wipe out the enemy. Hasten the day and remember the appointed time, and let people recount your mighty deeds. I think when he says hasten the day, he's talking about Judgment Day. Let him who survives be consumed in the fiery wrath, and may those who harm your people meet destruction. Crush the heads of the rulers of the enemy, who say, there is none but ourselves. Gather all the tribes of Jacob and give them their inheritance, as at the beginning. Have mercy, O Lord, upon the people called by your name, upon Israel, whom you have likened to a firstborn son. Have pity on the city of your sanctuary, Jerusalem, the place of your rest. Fill Zion with the celebration of your wondrous deeds, and your temple with your glory. Bear witness to those whom you did create in the beginning, and fulfill the prophecies spoken in your name. Reward those who wait for you, and let your prophets be found trustworthy. Hearken, O Lord, to the prayer of your servants, according to the blessing of Aaron for your people, and all who are on the earth will know that you are the Lord, the God of the ages. The stomach will take any food, yet one food is better than another. As the palate tastes the kinds of game, so an intelligent mind detects false words. A perverse mind will cause grief, but a man of experience will pay him back. A woman will accept any man, but one daughter is better than another. A woman's beauty gladdens the countenance and surpasses every human desire. If kindness and humility mark her speech, her husband is not like the other men. He who acquires a wife gets his best possession, a helper fit for him and a pillar of support. Where there is no fence, the property will be plundered, and where there is no wife, a man will wander about and sigh. For who will trust a nimble robber that skips from city to city? So who will trust a man who has no home and lodges wherever night finds him? And there certainly is a difference between a man who is dishonorable, who has not taken a wife, compared to a man who has not taken a wife because of his commitment to chastity and continence. But there are some men who do not take a wife because, well, they like to fornicate. But guys, I think there is a certain amount of respect that comes from being married for the rest of the world. I mean, the rest of the world will respect you more. I think they'll listen to you more. They'll see you as more mature if you're married. But as a Christian, guys, I don't look down on anyone who has decided to remain celibate. I only have more respect for them. I wish I'd done it myself. And yes, you will hear me mention this every call we have. All right, well, let us take these things in a spiritual sense.
Luke, why do you wish so? Is it just that you'd have more time?
Yep, exactly. So I could do more for God's kingdom. I've limited myself. See, guys, you can take an adult like one of you guys and win him to the faith and have a harvest of souls for God's kingdom. Any person can do that. A massive harvest in a short amount of time. Many more souls will be saved. Compared to dedicating many decades of your life to raising children. It's a very slow, long process of raising children. And the harvest is it's just not as much. However, those children that are raised in a Christian household, if they're raised right, they will be very strong. And it's a great gift to give to them. And it's a great gift to give to the rest of the world, to raise up this child who never knew the corrupting influence of the world, but stayed pure from a young age. That's a great gift to them, and for the world to meet a person like that is also a great gift. So I do hope to give the world that, but I could have spent much more time working for God's kingdom if I had not gotten married.
So do you think you would never have done it, or just waited till you were in your 30s?
Oh, just never done it. If I'd been stronger, if I could have prayed for the gift of celibacy. It's a gift. Paul says not everyone has that gift, but then the church father's going to say, but you can pray for it. If you pray for it, God will give it to you. You just have to desire it. You have to change your desires. You have to actually honestly say to yourself, all right, I'm going to change my mind here. I actually want to be celibate. I no longer want a wife. I want to be celibate. And God will give you the strength to live celibately so that you no longer have such a strong desire for marriage. You'll be able to live contentedly. All right, I better check comments here. Yes, the reward is very great for remaining celibate. I see you're already grabbing quotes, Dante. Irene says, they practice also magical arts and incantations filters also, and love potions, and have recourse to familiar spirits, dream-sending demons, and other abominations, declaring that they possess power to rule over, even now, the princes and formers of this world. So some of these heretics apparently are listening to the dream-sending demons. Save that quote, Dante. You're already starting a list of quotes on dreams. Let's save that quote. Yes, people should not give heed to all their dreams. A lot of dreams can come from demons. Yes, Aaron, I said if people are given to pleasure in their marriage, they're not going to receive as great a reward as somebody who controls themselves. But there will always be varying degrees of rewards in this life.
Do we have any clue at all what the rewards are, or are we just told they're like crowns or something?
Oh, Aaron, the things waiting for us in the next life are just beyond our imagination. We do not know.
Mm.
But it's kind of like when a father says to his son, I'm going to give you a big reward. And that little kid, especially the younger they are, that little kid has no way of knowing what his dad is going to give him. You know how many things I've given to my son, my little 4-year-old or my 2-year-old, in the short amount of time that they've been alive? I have so many rewards for them that they could never have imagined. When I give them something like, what in the world is that? Because in this life, it's an illustration. If you were just to take food alone, there's so many kinds of food I could give my children as a reward that they could never imagine. They never even knew existed. And the same will go in the afterlife, that God has things prepared for us. When he says he's got a reward and something great for you, you've got to believe him. It's something beyond your wildest imaginations. And if you're asking yourself, well, is it worth it to work for an extra reward, like something beyond eternal life? The answer is yes, it is worth it. Absolutely. Don't doubt, but you know what? Anybody who doubts, hey, you're going to miss out on it, and others are going to get it, and they're going to have no regrets for sacrificing little temporary pleasures in this life for the eternal bliss, the eternal rewards of the next life.
And you can only get, like, you can't go into the next life and then work and get them there. It's only here you can get your rewards.
I've never read anywhere in the scriptures or the fathers that would indicate you could work in the next life to get the greater rewards.
Mm.
It's the time of rest. No more work. You're going to settle down in your inheritance. No more work. That's the payday. And I'm sure it'll be great, even if I don't get the greatest possible reward. But isn't it great, guys, that God tells us you're actually going to receive a greater reward if you labor in this life? I mean, all people receive the same wage of eternal life. But Jesus says, you know, the person who has 10 talents, he receives more because he handled his 10 talents very well. More than the
So what
person
are the
with 5.
things? Sorry, what are the things that you can do to the highest maximizing get them in the next life?
Well, that's a great question, Aaron. That's a very high-minded question to ask. I mean, what a thing to ask everybody, to say, what are the things I can do in this life to go above and beyond what is required? Well, to live life celibately, and to be an evangelist, and to give up all of your possessions, to sell everything you have, to deny yourself every kind of pleasure, and not just to give those things up and throw them in the trash somewhere, but to actually give to people who are in need, to become wise, and through your wisdom and your knowledge to help others who are confused and who are deceived. What else? Those things certainly have a great reward.
Mm.
I'm sure there are other things, but I'm drawing a blank. Okay, well, let's read Sirach 37. You guys keep writing down any questions or ask a question if you can think of anything. Dante, definitely save that quote. It's a really good quote.
God is saved. There's
Great.
also martyrdom. But
There's a what?
martyrdom, but you can't really choose that, I
Ah,
guess.
that's so true. Dante's right. Martyrdom. What an obvious one. Well, again, that's something that is actually a gift. I mean, the early church would call that a gift. If you had actually been chosen to be a witness for God and live in a time period or a location where that's actually something people are being tested with. I mean, what a way to end this life. If you were to end as a celibate man who had lived as an evangelist and then got martyred, I mean, you're in John the Baptist territory. John the Baptist gave up all pleasures of this life and was a preacher for years and then was martyred. And that's why Jesus said, of those born of women, there is nobody greater than John the Baptist. Yep, there's a perfect.
So Luke, you think
Yes.
like you know how you said it was illegal in China right now to be a Christian. So like
You
some
think you can
guys
fly down
think
there and get martyred? Well, I'll tell you something. Aramis had that idea when he first became a Christian. We told him, don't. We told him, you are not allowed to seek for martyrdom. You're actually forbidden to do that. Now, if you had the goal of going and preaching to people, teaching people in a dangerous area, that's not forbidden. But to go and like rile up some murderous person and tempt them to kill you, that's not a righteous thing to do. You're forbidden from doing that. And there are multiple reasons why we told Aramis not to do that. First of all, he's a new convert. You can't go teach anybody. Second of all, he doesn't speak Chinese. So that's just foolish. You're not going to be able to help anybody in China. But if you were to learn Chinese and become very wise, very firm in your faith, then you could help people in China.
Is wisdom only an age thing?
No. No, God gives. We're about to read in Sirach where he says that God gives wisdom sometimes to the young and withholds it from the old.
So you wouldn't say you have to have a family to, or be a certain age to teach.
No. Oh, of course not. You don't have to have a family to teach. No. John the Baptist
But
didn't
you,
have a family.
mm, but you wouldn't. How long would you say until someone is ready?
Well, it's a little bit subjective to the specific person. I don't mean subjective as in impossible to ever ascertain. But in apostolic constitutions and in Hippolytus's book called Apostolic Tradition, when they're talking about the requirements for a person becoming a Christian or being a catechumen, like how long they have to be a catechumen before they get baptized, they say 3 years on average. But they say, but if a person if they show earnestness and if they show great zeal, then you can baptize them early. They said it's not the amount of time that's judged, but every individual person's zeal. And then in apostolic constitutions, I think it's the next sentence, it talks about teachers too. It says, people should wait until they're older to teach, but they say, but if there's someone who's young, who's skillful in teaching, then let him teach. But they don't give a specific age. I think it's just something on a case-by-case basis where I think some older men, they would say, listen, this younger guy shows a great promise in his teaching ability. Let's help him out and let's bring him up to a point where he can help out with the teaching because he has a gift. And I would do the same thing to you guys. I'm no elder, but I would just tell you if I think you should teach. Like Aramis has been a Christian for less than 2 years, but he's been reading the church fathers a ton. And he's just applied himself so much in ways I probably couldn't even describe right now because you guys would have to be with him to see. But I would encourage, and I do encourage Aramis very much to teach and to make those videos he's making. He's got a gift for it, and he also has the knowledge. Sometimes, guys, you don't even need any kind of teaching ability, but it's just pure knowledge and wisdom that makes you capable of teaching. So if you were to apply yourself to learning, you'd become a wise man, and you'd be a great teacher. Remember that all men are supposed to be teachers if they get married. There's no two ways about it. Paul says that if any woman has any questions when she's hearing the sermon on a Sunday, then she should go to her husband at home and ask him questions. So that means every man must be a teacher. And you know that's true because you're supposed to have children. You're required to if you're going to get married. At least, unless you're going to remain celibate like Paul. But if you get married, you're going to have children. You have to teach your children. So the majority of men are called to teach, at least teach their wives and their children. But it's up to you as to whether you're going to go outside the home and teach. And in the early days of the church, your church leaders would tell you if they thought you should be helping to teach larger groups of people. For us guys, we're on our own. We live in a world where there are no more reliable leaders. So we should just be wise and not jump into teaching unless we're very knowledgeable about the subject we're teaching on. So that's what I'll caution you guys to do. I wouldn't. I don't have the authority to forbid any of you guys from teaching, nor does Nolan or Christian or Aramis. However, if it were severe enough that, like, we thought you guys were being really reckless in teaching when you have almost no knowledge on the subject you're teaching, we would be pretty severe with you and say, what are you thinking? That is so reckless. You should not be teaching anybody right now. I think we have said that to a couple of you. You just need to hold your horses. We see the zeal you have. We know that you want to save souls, but you have to learn about these things before you can help others. You have to learn how to swim before you go and save a drowning person, or else you're both going to drown.
But are you able to like do it as the pastor, or is that completely different now? You couldn't open up your own building and teach in that way.
Well, what do you mean by that, Aaron? Are you talking about me personally, or just anybody in the church?
I remember you saying how pastors today are really supposed to be like presbyters or something. That's what they would be in. Oh no, presbyter was like second in command or something.
Yes,
But
that's
I'm
right.
not too sure.
Yes, you're right. The presbyter,
Yeah,
and that means an elder. It's a guy who's helping out the bishop.
mm, yeah. But you said even yourself, you couldn't call yourself that because there's no bishops to give you that role.
Oh, right. We're not any kind of official leader in a church. We're just laity.
So does that mean you wouldn't be able to open up your own church and then, or not church, but just building and then teach in that way, similar to how pastors do it today?
Well, Aaron, the building has nothing to do with the church. It has
Mm.
0% to do with the church. It's not that it just has 10% to do with the church. 0% to do with the church. No religion and no teacher gains any more legitimacy from having a building. It means nothing. The church used to meet in houses. The church used to meet underground, literally, in catacombs and in sewers. That was the place to go have your church service.
So are you saying that we could basically, once we're wise enough, be like elders, but we just wouldn't have the title?
Right, you would not be officially ordained. It's just that you would have the discipline of a priest. And if you're a righteous enough man, then I mean, if you had met somebody in the early church, they'd say, "Oh my goodness, are you a priest?" And you'd have to say, "No, I was never ordained as a priest, but I'm trying to act like one." And that would be good.
Ah, okay, that makes sense then.
Yes, and in order for us to baptize or offer the Eucharist, we're strongly urged by the church fathers, both pre and post, that we should have the discipline of a priest if we are ever to celebrate the sacraments. Otherwise, we're in a lot of danger.
Does that just mean a righteous man?
Yes. Yep, a very self controlled man. And especially if a person is to offer the Eucharist to God, which is a commemoration of Jesus' body and blood, that man should have a lot of self control. He can't be some guy who's going around just out of control, a slave to his passions, to his lust, to his belly. He should have control of himself. And I've been convicted about that. When we first, I mean, I've always known about the Eucharist, guys, because my dad taught it to me. But my dad used to celebrate communion in our own home, and over time I learned that it was very inappropriate just because of who my dad was. I didn't have communion with my dad, obviously, when I moved away from him, but I kept having communion. And then, as of more recently, I realized, man, why am I still having communion? I think I should get the discipline of a priest before I do this. That's what the church said. So I'm working on my own discipline so that I can celebrate it without any danger.
What is that discipline?
Well, you're asking a very specific question, Aaron, but I'll just be completely frank. I'm trying to become more continent, more self-controlled when it comes to just having relations with my wife for pleasure. Not that we would ever practice any birth control or anything, but just when somebody is so given to pleasure that they sometimes feel like they just have to do it, it's not a good sign. And I've always known that the church says continence is something that priests should all be practicing. And I know I'll never be ordained as a priest, but I still want to have the discipline of a priest. And I want to have the highest standard. I want others to be able to look at me and the other brothers and say, you guys are really standing out. You're going above and beyond. You guys are not like, the average person who's just coming into the church. We want to be inspiring and we want to be a good example. So I am trying to pursue that higher standard. And I have not attained it yet, but I'm trying to. I'm putting in more of an effort than I ever have before.
Mm.
I like the highest standard, just like you were asking. You were asking, what are those things that we can do to receive the greatest reward? And now, as I'm getting older and hopefully wiser, I'm starting to ask myself that question. How do I get the biggest reward? I would like the greatest reward.
Mm.
And guys,
And then,
if you shoot for perfection, you're way more likely to be saved. If we only shoot for the bare minimum, I mean, who is it, guys, that only aims for the bare minimum? Who even attains the bare minimum? It's very rare. Usually we have to shoot for something beyond the minimum in order even to reach that. So let's not be reckless with our salvation. Let's all strive for perfection. And nobody's going to say you have to strive for all the greatest and most ascetic character traits in order to be saved, but it still is a wise thing to not just aim for bare minimum requirements.
and
I have a
Luke.
question.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. You go, brother.
All right. I was just gonna say, I know there's other ways to obtain forgiveness of sins, but even if we're like scared of taking the Eucharist, should we still take it because it is a command, or
Dante, I've considered that as well. And in the scriptures, Paul says that if anyone eats of the body and drinks of the blood in an unworthy manner, then he drinks judgment on himself, and that God will discipline us so that on the day of judgment we'll actually be saved. That's a reassuring thing to know that God would not damn you, but would rather discipline you and potentially punish you in this life. But at the same time, even though I know that's true, I still feel something in me saying it doesn't feel right to take it right now. I want to adjust my discipline first. I will go back to having the Eucharist, but I feel that there's something holding me back. But I will. I could never go an extended period of time. It's a fairly recent thing that I have not taken the Eucharist in a little while, in a few weeks. It's not like it's been a long time yet.
okay? All right.
It's a
So
personal
if you
conviction.
feel that you're not in a right state to take the Eucharist right now, it wouldn't be sin if you skip like a week of the Eucharist.
No, there are many times in the church where people would say that they feel they should skip. However, clergy, like
Isn't
if
the Eucharist to cleanse you of your sin?
yes, but remember that it doesn't do you much good. It's not a good idea to be taking the Eucharist if you haven't done penance, if you haven't shown repentance with your actions. That's a very dangerous thing to do. So I'm in the action phase where I'm trying to adjust my actions so that it's safe for me to take it without any fear of discipline.
So you need.
If somebody denies Christ and then they go back to the church and the priest just hands them the Eucharist without them doing any penance, that person's in danger of damnation. That person will not be forgiven automatically. They're both in a lot of danger.
Do you need the Eucharist to be forgiven of all sins or major sins?
Well, the Eucharist is when you're officially participating in Christ's body and blood, and you're joined both to Him and to the rest of His church. You're abiding in Him. So if a person has been cut off from communion, if they've actually been excommunicated because they fell away from the faith through some grievous sin like blasphemy or adultery, then in order to be restored to the body, they have to have the Eucharist. That's the only way to be restored. I mean, unless they die suddenly. If they die as a martyr, then they are also restored that way. But the way that was given to us is that they would be restored by having the Eucharist, which would be given by the priest, and the priest would bar them from receiving it until they showed their repentance. But you should not, you would be treating Jesus' body and blood in a very disrespectful way if you gave it to a wicked person. We are only to give it to Christians, Christians in lifestyle. So I don't know exactly what would happen there, but I do know Christ would be insulted if it was to be given to someone who's unworthy. Now, if he does it in an unworthy manner secretly, that's not the priest's fault. Then God will just judge him. But that's the point. It would be, I mean, yes, a lesser sin being cleansed in the Eucharist is one thing. We know that even lesser sins are cleansed by almsgiving. The scriptures say that. But some great sin, I mean, you can't just expect to take the Eucharist and be good in God's sight. You need to show your repentance and then be restored officially by having the Eucharist. And I think if a bishop were here, he would explain more nuances about that. I just know that nobody should be rushing into having the Eucharist if they've committed any serious sins. They should get out of the sins first.
So wouldn't you condemn yourself more if you took the Eucharist in that unworthy fashion?
Yes, you would be drinking judgment to yourself. And if God were to discipline you and then forgive you, that's wonderful, but I still wouldn't recommend people just do that on a regular basis. Okay, we have some questions here. Let me see if I can answer these. JB says, I have a question. Matthew 6:33, we're told to seek first the kingdom. Is this referring to heaven or to God's church on earth? Well, God's kingdom actually is here on the earth right now, in a spiritual sense, but it's going to physically and visibly come down when Jesus returns. So to seek first God's kingdom just means to look for all of the things that are eternal and to pursue those things and to forget about the temporal things. So to seek first God's kingdom would be that a person says, the things on earth that I was attached to before, those things I don't care about anymore. I don't worry about food or clothing or a house or even marriage. These things are no longer priorities to me. Only God's service matter to me and his commands, his righteousness. And Aaron, you asked, you asked something about Paul. Where did you ask that? What's the point of marriage, you said, if Paul was celibate? Well, the point of marriage is to have children. But if two people get married and they decide to live as if they are not married and to be celibate for the sake of God's kingdom, that has a great reward in it. But they would kind of, they would be like becoming virgins again by agreement. They'd be like agreeing to be celibate again, which is what Paul did with his wife. They said, all right, we're going to separate for the sake of ministry. And so they did that by agreement, and Paul was able to be more productive. But Paul also says in one of his letters that he has a right to take along his wife, just as Peter did. Peter actually did take along his wife. But Paul did not, for whatever reason. He considered it some impediment, and perhaps he was concerned about the danger that she would go through. We don't know for sure. We just know that Paul agreed with his wife not to take her along with him. Yes, Brian, I did answer your question about Matthew 16. That was the first order of business, and you can listen to it in the recording. Isaiah says, what would be the point of even getting married then? Yeah, you're right, Isaiah. There would be no point. If you are intending to live celibately, why would you get married? It makes no sense. Just don't get married. Receive your reward. Well, Aaron, Paul wasn't necessarily only married for like 1 year. Paul could have been married for many years and had children. But we don't know. But it would be silly to get married and then say, now let's be celibate. Companionship is rough, JB, because it'd be, with a woman you feel tempted. Trust me, if you're married. I'm right on the verge here of trying to be celibate and just saying it's difficult if you do sleep in the same bed. I will just say that. I'm going to have to make some plans here. But no, it won't hurt my relationship. I have a wonderful marriage. I just would like to be free of such desires, guys. It's a burden. I'd like to be productive. I want to be strong. But guys, marriage is a wonderful thing, and if you find a righteous wife, be married, enjoy your marriage, have righteous children, be a good father, be a good husband. I certainly will be a good father and a good husband. But I'm trying to be free from the desires of the flesh. Yes. Yes, Isaiah. Yes, I know my wife would be fine with that. No, Isaiah, do not get a dog. No. Ray, what do you want me to say against dogs? Do we need to have an anti-dog video? Where's Nolan? Where's Nolan? We need to get him in here. We're going to have our dog call now, guys. We're going to talk about dogs real quick. Where is Nolan? I'll say what needs to be said about.
He's not playing. He
I'll,
doesn't
I'll
like
be.
dogs.
I'll say what needs to be said about dogs, but I wish Nolan was here. Dogs,
not allowed.
guys.
He's even gone as far as to say it could be sin, Isaiah.
Well, Ray, come on,
Wait,
don't hype him up here. Let's be rational here, guys. A dog is not
I'm
a having a dog as a pet, having a dog as a helper. I mean, is not a
You said
sin.
it could be. You said it could get
Well, certainly, if a person wastes thousands of dollars on their dog, it is a sin. You're treating it like a human being. All the evil of calling dogs people, this culture that now treats them like they're human beings and gives them the same respect is evil. People will have those little moral dilemmas sometimes, and they talk about, if there was two people drowning and you could only save one of them, and it was a dog or a human, who would you save? And a lot of people are like, I'd save the dog. It's all so ridiculous. Dogs are not people. Dogs don't have souls like ours. They're not going to live eternally. Every dog that dies, that little soul that they had is snuffed out, no longer exists, it's gone. So we should not be showing such love to dogs. Dogs are to be useful tools to us. We're not to treat them like people. A dog can keep you warm, if there's a very cold night. But we are not to have like sleep companions and treat them like a human being like that, but rather as a tool. That's what they are. And dogs are not to be treated like human beings or have thousands of dollars wasted on them, on the food and the comfy beds and the comfy clothes for dogs. I said it once, but I was with my wife at a clothing store, and we were going through clothes to buy for our children, and we're going by and we're like, oh, let's buy some clothes for our children. We look at these little children clothes and we're like, oh, would these fit our children? We're like, oh, wait a second, this doesn't look right. What is this? This doesn't look like it. Is this human clothing? And we realize it's not for humans, it's for dogs. They have a dog clothing section at the clothing store. And you see these dogs in strollers at the park. I've seen them. You all have seen them. Dogs in the strollers. You hear these people referring to their dogs as fur babies. I've got my babies. I mean, I'm reading these articles all the time, guys, about Christianity, and we see these pastors will post in their little bio at the bottom of the article. They'll say, Mike so and so is the husband of a very loving wife and 3 children, and then they'll have like a little joke. They'll be like, 2 of whom are fur babies. I mean, you're referring to dogs as your children? Dogs are not your children. Dogs are not human beings. They're animals. They're meat. If you were hungry, if you were starving, if you needed food, you would kill the dog. You would kill the cat. You'd kill the horse. You'd kill the cow. You'd kill the chicken. You would use it as meat and eat it. It's not a person.
Shout out Asia.
Yes, absolutely, Asians. They've got the right idea. Dogs are not worth more than any other animal. They're all the same. They're only as useful as the purpose they serve. To bark when an enemy is approaching or an animal is approaching to come eat your animals. But we are not to treat dogs like people. That's a modern invention. And yes, some of the church fathers do talk about people who take pets, extravagant pets, and waste lots of money. And it used to be something that only rich people did. Nolan has the quotes from Tertullian on that subject. We'll have to put together some quotes. Birds. Yeah, the Romans liked to take birds and parrots and waste a lot of money and a lot of time training them. It's like having a movie or a video game. It's just something to waste your time on. Oh, I'm going to go take my dog for a walk. But then there's the moral issue. I'll tell you where it's a moral issue is when I come into your house and your dog jumps on me and you think it's so cute. Oh, get off of him, Sparky. Don't jump on the stranger. Oh, you're barking at them now. Oh, you're clawing at them. Oh, please don't be offended. My dog literally just jumped on you. My wild animal is scratching you and is, like licking you now. Now you're being slobbered on and its stinky breath is on you and its horrible mangy body is rubbing against yours. I mean, I don't want to be attacked by your dog in your house. I've actually gone to people's houses and their dog, this is pretty embarrassing to even talk about. It's just disgusting. Everybody knows what these dogs do. These little dogs will go up and just start doing what against your leg. I mean, guys, that's disgusting. If an animal performs a sexual act against a human being, it should just be killed immediately. It should be, yes. It should be killed immediately. That's such an abomination. How can you possibly tolerate such a thing?
It's safe to say you won't be giving your children any pet dogs.
Oh no, Aaron, I love dogs. No, Aaron, dogs have a purpose outside. But I mean, I talk to people on the phone at my job, and I always notice the same thing. All the people I'm talking to who are like talking through their nose, and you can tell they have like breathing problems. It's because they've got all these dogs in their house. All this dog hair and cat hair is all over, floating around in the air and messing up their sinuses and messing up their children's breathing. Their children can't breathe because they've got these dogs inside the house, a thing unheard of. And so everybody's dying, everybody's choking to death. They've got their asthma or whatever. And they don't realize it's because they love this animal, which is only going to die in a few years anyway. And you're like, no, dogs are so useful. He plays fetch or whatever. I told him to run and do fetch. Somebody's like, dogs, they're so useful. They helped me once. I was in danger and the dog came and helped me. Well, I mean, you need to get some more human friends to come and help you. But dogs have done a lot worse, a lot more evil than good when it comes to being pets. We've got wild animals that go and maul people's faces. They're always biting people and I love it too when I go to somebody's house and their dog just starts growling or barking, and they're all like, "Hey, Fido, come on, calm down, doggy." I mean, they act like this dog can understand them when they talk to the dog. They're so delusional, guys. It is very delusional to talk to an animal like that and imagine that it understands you. And also just to tolerate it growling. You have an animal in your house growling at you. You think that's normal to have an animal growling at you in your house, around your children. That's delusion. That's insanity. I mean, but I guess it's spiritual. It has a symbolic meaning too, that people are around spiritual dogs, spiritual animals, people who are evil, and they tolerate it. They tolerate this evil instead of getting away, fleeing. They're like, no, that's normal. We should just tolerate that. No, don't tolerate wild animals in your house. Get them out of your house. Please understand how important hospitality is, guys. As Christians, when people come into our house, they should feel very welcomed. They should feel safe. They should feel at peace. You should not have this animal making this noise, which I won't imitate because it's so obnoxious. But the barking animal in your face when you walk into somebody's house is such an inhospitable thing to subject them to, that they would have to deal with this shouting animal and then the running and jumping on them. It's not hospitable. It's not cute. It's horrible. And it's unheard of. It's this recent thing of people making animals into people. Belongs outside. Let it chase the animals. Let it run around and chase rabbits or something. Don't put it in your house. Don't spend thousands of dollars taking it to the vet. Oh, kissing their dogs. Aaron's right, guys. Okay, you guys think about this. We made a video the other day about how Christians used to kiss each other, show affection to each other. And people are saying, kiss my brother? No way, man. That's weird. And yet, do you hear anybody making protests about kissing dogs? You know how many people I've seen kiss their dogs? On the mouth, guys, or on the nose. Their wet nose. I've seen them do it many times in my life. They don't think that's weird. That tells you guys this is a perverted society. You don't kiss your human brother. Why are you guys torturing me with these pictures? Why are you doing this? You wouldn't kiss your human brother, but you kiss a dog. And guys, what about the people who are in need? You should count up the hundreds and thousands of dollars that are spent on your animals that you could have spent on a brother in need. And don't think you're going to get one bit of credit from God on Judgment Day, where God sees all the people that you could have helped, and you say, "Well, I helped my doggy or my cat," and God's going to say, "What? You wasted it on an animal I never told you to take care of. I never told you to take care of that animal and make it your friend."
The animal for humans. You know the term, you're like a dog.
Yes, well, you'd never hear in the scriptures anybody being called a dog in an endearing way. But that's because people knew what dogs are. They're disgusting. Always they're talking about the analogies. You're like a dog that returns to his vomit, Peter says, about the Christian who would fall away from the faith and go back to his sins. Dogs are known for it. I've been to Christian's house. I've seen his outdoor dog, not indoor. I've seen his dog eat its vomit. Absolutely disgusting. Who could see such a thing and not just absolutely gag and go, "Oh my goodness, this thing doesn't symbolize anything good"? People are like, "Oh, doggy peed on the floor again. He pooped on the floor. Oh, he's eating his vomit. Oh, and now he's kissing me. I feel so loved by my dog." And I know somebody would say, "Oh, but what about your baby? Doesn't your baby poop and pee and you have to clean up after him?" Yeah, my baby is going to be a baby for a little while, a couple years, and he's going to grow up into a human being. He's going to actually someday be a celestial being that will live for eternity and be the son of Almighty God. You cannot compare that to the dog, which represents a sinner. All this effort, all this money, all this time spent on a dog, it is a waste. It will all be wasted in the end. You will say, "What a waste that we all wasted so much time on this dog that died." And everybody will say, "But we love animals. They give us so much love." No, it's grief, because then your dog dies and then you cry about it. You cry tears over a dog. No, it's bad in every possible way. Wait, Isaiah, what are you saying? What if someone was an ex-homosexual? I'll have to read what you guys are talking about here. Yes. Yo, Luke, could one abstain from the holy kiss if they feel that they might be tempted? Isaiah, we'll ask that question after you've been baptized in its time. Yes, I'm giving you reasons why dog pets not so good. Guys, don't ask questions like, "Hey, can I abstain from the holy kiss?" What kind of a question is that? Don't ask such questions. Oh, now that's where you're asking. What if someone was an ex-homosexual? Well, wonderful. They're not a homosexual anymore. They won't be. They won't be doing anything inappropriate then. Would they be way past being tempted by that time? Yes, exactly, Isaiah. They would be. There's nothing inherently sexual about a kiss, guys. I kiss my children. I kissed my parents. I used to kiss my siblings when I was a kid. I kissed them right on the lips. If you guys say that kissing is inherently sexual, then you're saying that anybody who kisses their children is doing something sexual and something perverted with their children. That's an evil thing to suggest. There's nothing inherently sexual about kissing. There's a kind of kiss that a person does with a spouse that is obviously not a normal kind of kiss. But if you're doing that with a child, then you are perverted, obviously. But a normal kiss, just a peck on the lips, is not inherently sexual. So, no, kissing another man is not inherently sexual. Kissing a child, kissing a brother, even kissing a wife. Not all kisses with a wife are some kind of kiss that's meant to stimulate. It's just a short little peck, a little kiss of affection. Yes. Kevon, what will not sound wild to you? And what's the other question, Isaiah? He says, I know the wife should stay in the house most time, but who does the grocery shopping? Is the husband supposed to? It's an amazing thing, Isaiah, that in these last times, we have access to this thing now called online grocery orders. My wife does the online grocery order thing, and somebody brings us our groceries every time, so she never has to go out of the house. However, she could go veiled. I would have to take her. But in the old
The
days,
delivery fee is crazy.
nah, it's not too bad. It's not. It's not bad. You got to get Walmart Plus. That's what you got to get. Yes, right. You look into an animal's eyes, you know there's nothing behind them. But Isaiah, I know that grocery orders haven't already existed. I'm just saying it's pretty cool now that we have online grocery orders. People used to have gardens; they wouldn't always be going to the market. But when they did go to the market, they oftentimes had servants go to the market for them. And if they didn't have servants, the dad could go. And if the dad didn't go, the sons could go. And if the sons didn't go, the mom could go, but she'd be veiled. And my wife has gone with me to the grocery store veiled many times. That's true, Isaiah. That's true. And online grocery order, unfortunately, does fail sometimes with the produce. They don't pick the best stuff. Aaron asks, are wives veiled if they go to the hospital and they're giving birth? Well, Aaron, think about that situation. If the baby is coming out of the mother, she doesn't really need to be veiled. She's like, what would it even mean to veil your face when your lower half is obviously giving birth to a baby? It doesn't really make a difference. My wife's first two babies were at the hospital. The last one we did in the bathtub at home, and we skipped all the midwife fees. It was great. Yes, you can ask for female doctors at the hospital. That's what we did. There were no men around whatsoever if you go to the hospital. But you don't have to go to the hospital. You can do it at home.
Luke, what were your hospital bills for giving birth?
I think they covered it. I think Texas Medicaid took care of it. I hadn't planned that far. But a guy came in and said, you got Medicaid? And I said, no. And he said, sign your name right there. I signed my name, and then they sent me a bill and said, you don't have to pay anything. I think they probably do that a lot. But yeah, no more hospital births. Yes, Aaron, my wife barely goes outside. One of the reasons I'm moving, aside from the fact that I would like to have a second house on my property like Christian has, and I'll work it out. I'll work it out. I'll even build it if I have to. Aside from the fact that I'd like a second house on the property in order for other people to crash at if they need to, if they're moving across the country or even from another country, I also just want to be able to give more like room to my children to play in the backyard, and for my wife to go into the fenced backyard where nobody can see her and just get some sun, because it's good to get some sun. It's healthy. So yes, I would like her to be able to go outside, but just in the fenced backyard, and I don't have a fenced backyard, so I gotta move. I could build it, but I'd rather move. Yes, she barely goes outside, Aaron, just like in the old days. Have you seen the big veil video? Gotta watch that whole thing. Yes, tell them that's a big no, Isaiah. Isaiah, I really wouldn't want anybody to go and check on me if there's nothing wrong with me. I just go to the doctor if there's something wrong with me. He's asking him questions about physicals. I've never understood the physicals. I'll tell you one thing that is absolutely forbidden is to ever send your daughter to go get a physical at a doctor's office. They do some of the most wicked things to daughters. Absolutely wicked. No, don't be obsessed with this hospital culture, guys. If there's nothing wrong with you, why would you go to the doctor? That's a modern idea. Eat healthily. You'll be fine. And if you die early, then just accept it. God's calling you home. All this preventative stuff, I mean, the best way to prevent a disease is to just eat healthily and get exercise and get some fresh air and get some sunlight. Aaron, you're asking if it's prison to be for a woman to be stuck indoors. I don't know what word you want to attach to it, but it's right is what it is that she be indoors. That's the work that God gave her. And she can do work in a garden if she has a garden in the back, but she just should not be running outside of the home. Her work is inside the home. Take care of the babies, housekeep, clean up messes. You know, if you have kids, then messes get made. I found out, guys, a couple days ago, I talked to a lot of people on the phone at my job. As I was talking to this person, they were saying that they can't afford. Well, okay, this guy says that he told his wife to quit her job. And he says, I'm telling her to quit her job and just stay home and take care of the babies because he says basically because they're at daycare, and daycare is so expensive that she has to go and work a job in order to pay for the daycare. And he says, but I realize now it would be better for her to just be at home taking care of the kids so that she doesn't have to pay the daycare. And he says, we're going to save like $1,500 a month. I was like, what? That much money a month? What do you have, like 10 kids or something? He's like, no, we just got like 3. Because, guys, it's about $500 per kid to go to daycare every month. Isn't that insane? People are paying daycare workers to take their children away from them. Mothers are going to work. They're becoming the slaves of other employers, other bosses, and they're being forced out of their homes and becoming a slave willingly, voluntarily, so that they can't see their children. And so that somebody else raises their child and they can't be at home taking care of their child, enjoying their time with their child, and their child enjoying their time with their parent. Can you believe this
Wicked.
perversion? Isn't that unbelievable? You're paying somebody to take away your child's childhood and your motherhood, and so that you can be somebody's slave, and that all the money you're working for, it just goes down the drain anyway. People are paying to have other people torture them and their children. It's unbelievable. And then again today I was on the phone and I spoke to somebody else. And this woman on the phone said that she did homeschool her kids for a short time. She said, but I got really antsy being at home all the time. And she said, so I got a job. I couldn't stand being at home all the time. I was so bored. And she said, so I got a job and I put my kids in daycare. And I had these 2 calls pretty close to each other. It's crazy. Somebody saying, I just can't stand being at home with my kid. What kind of a mother are you? You can't stand being at home with your precious, beautiful child's face. You haven't yet calculated what a great blessing it is to be able to see that beautiful child's face every day, to hear their sweet little laugh, to hear all their little questions and all the hilarious things they say, to teach them things, to be their mother. You just can't stand to be at home with your child. What is so obnoxious about that? You just can't stand the sight of them. You got to get out of here. You got to work a job. You don't want your kid to have a parent. You want somebody else to raise your kid. Yes, godly women are just like turtles, Isaiah. Now you're talking.
You should talk about homeschooling a little bit more when you can.
Yes, homeschooling's easy, guys. Somebody's like, how do we homeschool our children? That's so complicated. How do we do that? Do we have to have like a classroom? Gotta have a big whiteboard, a big chalkboard, and set up all the seats and the little chairs at the desks? Do we have to have like a big curriculum? Do we have to plan out the school year? How will we have breaks and recess? How does that work? I mean, guys, you're imagining some big public school. I remember my wife was asking basically these questions when we were getting married. Well, before we were married, of course, because we talked about it in a lot of depth, which you should do too, guys. Don't even consider marrying a woman if you haven't talked to her about homeschooling the kids. You're talking about her entire life as a mother here, being a homeschooler. If you haven't talked about that and you think somebody's the perfect person to marry, you basically know nothing about the person. You don't even know if their marriage potential. But homeschooling is very simple, guys. The truth is, you can teach all those things. You can teach math and history and especially their Christian education without any big organized curriculum. You teach it all organically. When I was little, guys, I remember the day that I started learning my letters. I was a little bit older than most kids when they first started. I was like 6 because my mom had a lot of kids and she was busy. But she finally got around to it, and I learned how to read so quickly. It was within just a few days. I learned how to read very quickly. And that's how it is. Somebody teaches you your letters, you learn how to read, and then they start giving you books to read, and you become educated from doing a lot of reading. You don't need book reports or anything like that. They're just reading. And we have the aid of YouTube now that it can teach so many concepts on every conceivable subject. You don't even need a mom standing up there doing all the instruction. She just goes on YouTube, she finds a list of videos she wants to teach her kid on a bunch of different subjects, and she gives them these videos to watch, and maybe she watches them with them and explains them. That's homeschooling. Homeschooling is not some kind of classroom with kids raising their hand and asking to go to the bathroom.
I'm pretty sure you said before, but it's not illegal to do this, right?
Not in the U.S. It's illegal in some places in Europe, which is just plain evil. That they would dare tell somebody they can't be a parent, essentially, and raise their kid however they want. I know in California, in the United States, it's very, very difficult to homeschool. But after COVID, guys, I mean, COVID was a gift in some ways, because after COVID-19, homeschooling became mandatory, and now you've got people homeschooling all over. It's more popular than ever. So it's great, guys. Let me tell you, my kids are going to get a great education. They're going to learn the scriptures. They're going to learn the early church. And I'll learn them pluses and minuses and times and equals, and that's it. And they can use a calculator if they need to calculate anything. It's silly and completely insane to teach kids geometry and calculus, advanced mathematics. Complete insanity. Why are you teaching your child?
Trigonometry.
It is exactly. It is a joke, guys. It's just a way of sucking the life out of somebody. And I'll tell you what public school is. Teaching kids chemistry and teaching them to speak French or some random language. It's only there to make people learn how to hate learning, to hate knowledge, to see learning things as boring and also as obnoxious, tedious, tiresome, monotonous. That's what they're really teaching people in the public schools. It's to hate learning because it's not interesting. It's the most uninteresting, useless things we're learning. But what you should do is you ought to be teaching them useful things. And math, I mean, come on. Math, it's so inconsequential in this life, guys. Everybody's using a calculator. At my job, I use a calculator for everything. You don't need to learn math. You got a calculator in your pocket all the time. Makes no sense. And when our moms say, but what about that time when you don't have a calculator in your pocket? Okay, give me a break. It still hasn't happened. Still has never happened, Mom. Sorry, I never used calculus. Oh, Aaron, don't torture me. No, it's a waste of time, Aaron. You know calculus, but do you know church history? They're teaching you history of the French Revolution, and you don't know the history of the church. It's the only history that matters. Okay. Yes, you do learn much faster and better at home. Aaron's exactly right. Isaiah says, Luke, if you're courting a woman, do all of the same rules apply in regards to interacting with women? Or is there less restrictions? Can you hang with her one-on-one as long as there's no touching or anything? Isaiah, it's an extremely inappropriate and wrong thing to take a woman and tell her to, hey, let's meet up, you and me, secretly somewhere. And you're like, oh, it's not secret, Luke. Okay, well, who's it with then? It is in secret if it's just you and her, one-on-one. That's a secret meeting. It's completely inappropriate. It's unheard of. Scandalous. The church says you're not allowed to do that. All right, let's read it again. I guess we're gonna read these things repeatedly. Let's see here. Full of what is it? Snares. Okay, we're gonna hear Clement. His second epistle on virginity. You're not allowed to be going with these girls in private. I'm going to read again. Clement says, "Now we are persuaded of you, my brethren, that your thoughts are occupied about those things which are requisite for your salvation. But we speak thus in consequence of the evil rumors and reports concerning shameless men who, under pretext, meaning under the excuse, of the fear of God, have their dwelling with maidens, and so expose themselves to danger, and walk with them along the road and in solitary places alone, a course which is full of dangers and full of stumbling blocks and snares and pitfalls. Nor is it in any respect right for Christians and those who fear God so to conduct themselves. Others too eat and drink with them at entertainments, allowing themselves in loose behavior and much uncleanness, such as ought not to be among believers, and especially among those who have chosen for themselves a life of holiness. Others again meet together for vain and trifling conversation and merriment, and that they may speak evil of one another. And they hunt up tales against one another, and are idle, persons with whom we do not allow you even to eat bread. Then others wander about among the houses of virgin brethren or sisters, on pretense of visiting them, or reading the Scriptures to them, or exercising them. For as much as they are idle and do not work, they pry into those things which ought not to be inquired into, and by means of plausible words make merchandise of the name of Christ. These are men from whom the divine apostle kept aloof, because of the multitude of their evil deeds, as it is written, thorns sprout in the hands of the idle, and the ways of the idle are full of thorns. So, do we walk along with women on the roads? Do we expose ourselves to dangers by walking with them along the road and in solitary places? A course which is full of dangers and full of stumbling blocks and snares and pitfalls? No, it is not right in any respect for Christians and those who fear God to conduct themselves like that. The answer is no. There are many other quotes
Could
like
you
that.
just walk up to a woman one day and be like, "Let's get married"?
If you meet some girl at the workplace, you happen to be at the workplace, which is a bad enough temptation, but you know what? We're all in it. It's the world we live in. We see women everywhere. We go grocery shopping. It doesn't matter where you are. The women are everywhere. Let's say you meet some poor immodest girl who has been taught by her parents to dress like a prostitute, and you have compassion for her, which was the case of me and my wife. When I met her, she said, "Will you teach me the Bible? Will you read the Bible with me?" she asked. So I said yes. This also was very dangerous for me to do. I started reading the Bible with her over the phone, not in person. This even you should not do. You should ask for your brothers to help you out. She should be veiled if it's going to be in person, and if she's going to do it over the phone, you need to just send her all the materials you can. Either send her the church fathers to read, or send her the videos we've made, or have her join the calls to listen to the things we've talked about. Have her listen to the recorded calls. And Isaiah, you should be very thankful that God has given us Christian sisters. You know, we could have just as easily been in a situation, guys, where all these things we're saying to you were hypothetical, when we were saying, well, there are some Christian women out there, and if they existed, then they should act this way. But we're not telling you that. We're telling you we have Christian wives, me, Noel, and Christian. 3 Christian wives who are acting the way we're describing, who keep themselves secluded, who have grown in holiness and wisdom by studying, who take care of their children at home, who don't have careers, who homeschool their children, who've left behind father and mother, left behind everything to be mothers and wives. And we also have other women in our server who are being chaste and who are also growing in wisdom. If you have any sisters that you know that would want to learn about the faith, be thankful to God that this fellowship we have here, guys, actually includes women, Christian women. So we will put you in touch with them, and they will share all the wisdom that they have as they also grow in wisdom and knowledge. And they'll be a good example. They'll give good advice, and they'll build them up. But I do not suggest that you try to teach someone all by yourself, even if it was a man, because you're so new to the faith. You're not capable of instructing them. But the fact that it's a woman, and the fact that you're also extremely tempted to lust after them, and you're probably already in the throes of your romantic hormonal feelings, just says that it's more dangerous than ever. And the fact that you've already set your mind on marrying this girl, a lot of you, when you don't even know what Christianity is. You don't even know what the requirements are. She doesn't know. You haven't told her. And yet you're sure you're going to marry her. Why don't you show her what Christianity is first, and then begin to think about such things? Yes, Isaiah. But they're there, and we will meet more. Um, Leo asked, what about high school diplomas, or can that be obtained through high school too? Well, in Texas, you can issue your own diplomas for your children. My dad gave me mine. I actually designed it online, and then he gave his stamp of approval on it. He just signed his name. That was it. So I'm graduated according to the state of Texas because my parents gave me a diploma. Yep. But by the way, guys, I've worked at multiple places. I've worked at 3 different places. They all said high school diploma required. I had a diploma, but nobody ever asked to see it. Nobody even asks for high school diplomas anymore. You don't have to worry about that with homeschooling. Yes, God bless our sisters. No, Aaron, never had heartbreak because I never fell in love with any girls before my wife. My wife is the first woman I ever had a real conversation with. I'm not doing roofing right now, Isaiah, but I'm thinking about getting back into it. In fact, Christian and I are both thinking about maybe doing a business together. If you have trustworthy brothers, you should really consider joining a business with them. I'm strongly considering that. Yeah, I was sheltered, guys. I was sheltered from women. My parents kept me indoors. I could have gone and pursued them online somehow, but as for meeting them in person, I went 19 years of my life being at home. When my 3 older siblings all moved out, my parents left me at home to take care of the kidlets, my younger siblings, because there were 9 kids in my family. So I had a very strict regimen for years, from about the age of like 15 to 19, of taking care of my younger siblings. So I didn't get to go out and meet girls. I think I did have a desire to get a wife. I think that was definitely there. I knew I was really lacking interaction with girls, but I just took care of babies and changed a lot of diapers, thousands of diapers. I calculated it was thousands. My younger brothers would not stop, and I wake up in the morning and go and make eggs and make their breakfast, and my brother Matthias would put one of the babies in their seats, and I'd put the other little toddler in his seat, and we'd spoon feed them all their little baby food, and clean them up. I'll clean up their bib and their face and their hands and everything with a rag, and go put them in the little living room to go and play with some toys and maybe watch a Bible cartoon. We go wash the dishes. We do our own schooling because we were homeschooled. We have to go read and do all of my grammar books and all of this and that. And then we'd change the baby's diapers throughout the day, get them all dressed, and yeah, that was it. Taking care of babies for years. And then when I was 19, I started reading the Church Fathers because my parents were getting divorced. And my little siblings were taken away. They were torn away from me. And so I started working with my dad in our roofing business from about 19 to 23. So another 4 years of doing roofing and not really getting out of the house except to go to churches and challenge pastors and things like that. And then I started working at Walmart when my dad was done with the roofing business. We begged him to be done with roofing. We said, please, Dad, no more roofing in this Texas heat. We're dying out there. Let us have our own. Actually, it wasn't just the heat, to be honest, guys. It was just that I didn't have any money. My dad wasn't giving me or my brother Matthias money. I didn't have a wallet. I didn't have any money of my own. Didn't have a bank account. I was 23. I was done with it. I said, I want to have my own money. I want to be able to start saving and think about getting married or something. And so Dad quit the roofing business, and Matthias started working at Walmart. I started working at Walmart. And you guys know the rest of the story. I met my wife there. Heartbreaks weren't really a thing back then, right? Well, I mean, I think they definitely were, Raheem, but only for men who went about all this the wrong way, falling in love with women for their looks and not for who they are, and then being shocked when the woman whose bad qualities caused them to become heartbroken turned out to be the very woman that she'd been the entire time, but they just were smart enough to look beyond the surface of her skin. If you look past the surface of a woman's skin and find out who she really is, you're going to find a really great candidate for marriage. And I know we've talked about this again, but I'll say it again because repetition isn't such a bad thing. But guys, arranged marriages are wonderful things. For 2 families to be very close in a close friendship and to decide that they are going to raise children for each other, to choose as husbands and wives, is a wonderful thing, especially in a Christian community. because the parents are involved. I mean, what do you think the chances are of those two ever getting a divorce when the parents are best friends, love each other? Those kids are going to get so much counsel, they're never even going to be allowed to consider divorce because they were taught what marriage really is. Marriage is not just two people falling in love with each other independently of their parents, just meeting each other somewhere and dating, fornicating with each other, and then deciding to get married. Marriage is something you consider before any touching, any physical contact. And in ancient times, you didn't even know what your spouse looked like before you were married. So your entire relationship had nothing to do with looks. However, the looks still they did contribute something because your wife was veiled until her wedding day. And can you guys imagine that feeling of taking off the veil of your wife and seeing her for the first time and knowing you're the only one besides her family members who has ever seen her? She just gave this gift to you. You are the man she has given herself to, nobody else. You guys realize even if she were ugly, it's a special gift because, I mean, the rest of the world doesn't even know she's ugly. For all they know, she's just, drop dead gorgeous. But she knows she is just for you. This woman is just for you and no one else. That's a wonderful gift to give on a wedding night. And to have it for the rest of your life. It's a wonderful gift. No, people are missing out. People are missing out with the whole dating thing. Everybody getting to see your wife. Everybody getting to be with your wife and do whatever they want. No, what a horrible, miserable world we live in where everybody's been with your wife before you have. No, heartbreaks were a thing, Raheem. Just not with any man who was going about these things the right way. Again, not to discourage anyone who has fornicated, guys. I know that you have great regret about that if you have. God will still give you a righteous spouse if you weed out all the sins in your life and get yourself cleansed of your sins. God will give you a righteous wife or husband.
Honestly, it seems like marriage today is like a joke. Like people always say, like, "Oh, I got to clean up my act. I'm finally getting married." And they'll be like, "I got to stop with the porn and the drugs and the prostitutes." Like after they get married, and they just think, well, before you get married, that's the time to be a degenerate and to give everything up.
Yeah, to ruin your life so that you can't have a good marriage, basically.
Yeah, it's terrible. Honestly, I can't think of anything worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people have true love when they fall in love. The world thinks it's a natural thing to have love with many people, have that kind of intimate romance. And they play it off when they see 13-year-olds doing it with each other, and they say, oh, that's puppy love. And they're like, oh, you'll get over it. Oh, that was your first heartbreak? That's what they say. What a horrible thing to say to somebody. The love that two 13-year-olds have with each other is just as genuine, just as real as 30-year-olds. There's no difference. To just brush that off as some kind of fake love is so disrespectful. And it's really disrespectful that the parents sent those kids out in the first place to go find somebody to marry, some other totally immature person who's not ready to be married, and to treat romance as something that happens apart from marriage. It's a separate thing. Oh, you got romantically involved, you fell in love, yeah, but you're never supposed to get married to that person. Well, no, you're only supposed to feel romantic like that with your spouse, nobody else. Ashton points out something, Courier here. He was just pointing out how silly it is for anybody to say, what if she's not beautiful? But guys, first of all, true beauty is internal. It's who that person is. If you had an ugly spouse, guys, if there was somebody who absolutely loved you to death and you loved them to death, it would have nothing to do with their external beauty. Don't you know that external beauty fades anyway? And if anybody says, well, I just want to be the one who, I just want to choose her based on her beauty first. Well, you know what? You're asking for something that's not owed to you. You want to see somebody's daughter? Try pulling that in ancient times. Only person who's going to let you see their daughter without you being married first is some guy who's kicked his daughter out of the house because she's a prostitute. So you'd be able to find a great, beautiful prostitute by requiring that you see somebody's face before you marry. It's just a wicked thing to require that you see somebody's face. But another point on top of that, aside from the fact that people are beautiful on the inside, and you'd be a very evil person to just stop loving your wife if she ever stopped being beautiful, which she will someday. And think about also, if she'd been in a car accident, her face had been mangled and deformed, would you just stop loving her? What if she were burned? You're going to stop loving her? Give me a break. You're going to stop loving your children if they get hurt? You love your children because they're beautiful? Don't suggest such evil things. God will judge you. Do not choose a wife on her beauty. But even if all those things weren't true, Ashton makes a great point. For goodness sake, guys, what woman in her late teens or 20s or even 30s is not beautiful? If a woman is young, she's beautiful. All women are beautiful. You're going to say, "Oh, I want a supermodel." Guys, women are beautiful. I mean, seriously, I'm not just saying this as some kind of compliment to women. Like, if you're a normal, healthy person who is not addicted to filth on the internet, then just seeing any young woman and knowing that this woman loves you, if you were to marry this woman, even if she was not a supermodel, just knowing this woman loves you, I mean, is she not going to be the most beautiful thing? Being young and healthy pretty much makes you all beautiful. You try telling it to an old person, like some 60-year-old person, like, well, I wouldn't marry, that girl in her 20s because she's not really, super beautiful. They'd say, "What are you talking about, kid? Wait until you get in your 60s. Everything will be put in perspective again, and you'll see that everybody is beautiful if they're in their 20s. You're crazy to say that girl's not beautiful. You're crazy. Messed up. Your mind is warped because of what you've seen on the internet." All right, Yvonne said, "I don't know if you talked about this, but how do you personally go about homeschooling your sons? Like, what's the curriculum?" We were talking about that just a minute ago, Yvonne. I think just before you came in the call. But there's no curriculum. My mom did a real curriculum. She did do that. She would have like a whole course because she wasn't sure what homeschooling was, so she went about it very formally, actually having a little classroom. But I realized how silly it all was because I didn't even need all that stuff she taught me about math or giving us the math textbooks or the chemistry textbooks, the science textbooks. I didn't need to learn all that. It was useless. And the history books, too, were useless. Let's just go and learn about useful things in history, starting with church history and the scriptures. It's the most important history. Somebody says, "No, I want to give it a balanced approach. How about half secular history and half church history?" No, no, you've really missed the mark here. All that stuff about all the basics about America being founded or the Civil War or whatever, it can be learned in 5 minutes. You don't need to go very much in depth. What you do need to go in depth about is church history and biblical times and the development of the heresies over time. That's really the only history they need.
Luke, is this being recorded?
Yes, it is.
So it's going to go with the other course?
Yes, I'll put it with the other ones.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was wondering that because I always, with the whole homeschooling thing, it kind of because I got in the mindset of I want to do that now. I was thinking oh dang, do I need to make sure like my wife is smart so she can teach them? It's a worry that came when thinking about that.
No. Guys, have you ever met somebody that doesn't know how to read in America?
Nah.
Never, guys. Everybody learns how to read. It's like saying, there's some people that don't learn how to walk. Every baby learns how to crawl and then how to walk. Everybody knows how to read, and reading is the most important kind of education you get, and everybody gets it. Everybody can read. So, even writing, they talk about reading and writing. Guys, how much does writing really matter in this age right now? We type, we text. Even writing doesn't matter anymore. Your handwriting and all that doesn't matter. Just worry about learning the truth, learning what's important for your soul. On Judgment Day, there will not be a quiz, a trivia about world history or mathematics or chemistry. Just learn what's essential for your soul and for your child's soul. Do you think, guys, any one of us, if we were to go and tell people what's necessary for their soul, and if we were to share wisdom, such wisdom as we've gathered from the Proverbs or Sirach or anywhere in the Scriptures or in the Fathers, that any person would be unimpressed with us after hearing all the things we taught them about the meaning of this life and how to have a good marriage, how to raise righteous children, how to be a good brother, how to love your neighbor, how to be pure from sin? Do you think if they were to hear all those things that they would suddenly disrespect us if they found out we just didn't know much about mathematics? You think they'd say, "Oh my goodness." I mean, first of all, they'd be amazed at your wisdom. But then, what, you think they'd say, "What, you don't know trigonometry? Oh my goodness, you're an idiot." No, guys. Because people know what really matters in this life.
Well, Luke, this is something I've always thought, though. I think understanding some secular things can make it easier for you to bridge the gap between people who are not religious in the first place. I've always thought the best metaphors to come up with, I've always known them like even before I was religious. Some of the best metaphors I've ever heard of, and
Like
some of the
what?
best ways to explain to people. Well, okay, so to be fair, a lot of it you mentioned it like stuff in nature. So I guess that goes along with learning. But even in mathematics, there are things that I can point to that could convince someone that God might be real. And there are like a lot of things like that out there. I don't think it's all worthless.
Well, if you're talking about things like using pop culture references, like referencing Marvel's Avengers or something.
Yeah, I didn't want to sound too cringy, but stuff like that. I mean, I think it has its place. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we've put Star Wars scenes and stuff in our videos. You know, the guys that the church fathers constantly reference the Greek myths, and so even do the apostles. You know that the apostles reference the Greek myths in Acts and even in Paul's letters.
Yes, I was thinking like, doesn't it still apply with modern day? Like the way I see, like even things like history, you can use it. Having historical knowledge can help give someone some kind of context for certain events.
I could also
Like,
back that point up because I know, like math, there's this thing called the Mandelbrot set,
yeah, exactly. I was
and
gonna bring that
right,
up.
and it proves through math the how God has to.
So
So
I definitely think
I
these
agree with
secular
John. I
things
think you
I
can
learned
use certain
did
things.
help me a lot. You know, not all of it was worthless. 90% of it was worthless, but I think if you really are seeking the truth, even these secular things you learn will lead you to the truth.
But what is more effective as a tool for evangelism, John? To point to nature, to point to the obvious design in nature, which is undeniable. Your eyes can look at it and you can see that God has created this world, created your body. Or to refer to some piece of evidence that a scientist put forward to say, oh, there's some kind of mathematical equation that's beyond all comprehension and it could only have been made if there's a God that invented it, such as the Mandelbrot set or any other
It would,
thing in.
it would depend on who I'm talking to. It would
But see,
depend on who I'm
so
talking
many of those things require already some kind of deep understanding of science, even to know it. You can't even use it on the average person. You'd be having to talk to some other sophisticated person who really is deluded by the wisdom of the world, instead of saying that true wisdom is simple and doesn't require some kind of degree.
Yeah, I guess I see your point. I'm just saying there's some situations where different things I've learned in history have led me to become more of a Christian, and if anything. And I don't know if I would have become one if I hadn't figured out that information because it did help me in some ways.
It
I
might help,
agree.
but I think it's virtually impossible to ever find some person who could hear all the evidence that we can show them, just the simple evidence, and who would reject all of it and then to finally become a Christian because they learned about the Mandelbrot set.
I guess you're right. That such a person is unlikely to exist.
Yes. But we can make references to culture in order to help people, but they don't really need it. That's more just us condescending to them, and it's the apostles condescending. I think the more relevant reason to refer to anything in culture is if it acts as some kind of distraction. I wouldn't bring up Marvel to somebody who's never seen Marvel or already thinks that Marvel is terrible. But if somebody loves the Marvel movies, then I might point out something to them and say, have you ever noticed that all these movies are always talking about some greater conflict in this life, some kind of spiritual conflict, especially involving invaders, invaders coming into this world and
I
corrupting
think that's what
humanity.
John was trying to convey. He wasn't just saying like you use this on any.
Right, right, right. Yes, I understand the point. I definitely understand. I'd say, you ever notice how in all these movies like Marvel, which is one of the highest grossing movies in the world, that they're talking about Greek mythology? So many of the characters are from Greek mythology or Norse mythology, which repeat the same legends which are given in the scriptures about the Nephilim and about God and Satan and the angels.
Yeah, I definitely found that to be really interesting. Like I never had heard of that before. you mentioned it. But it makes a ton of sense.
What's so weird? Like I was hearing somebody talk to me about how ridiculous, how crazy it is to be a stupid Christian and to be, believe in God and Satan and angels, and they're like, you're so cringe, man. And I click on this guy's profile picture on YouTube, and I find he's a gamer. And what game is he obsessed with? He's obsessed with Doom, where a guy goes to hell and is fighting off demons, and he goes into the spiritual realm and has, also meets angelic beings. I mean, it's just comedic when you hear this. Like, they're telling us Christianity doesn't matter, but then in all their movies and all their video games, they're obsessed with all these Christian themes. Well, clearly it
Yeah,
does
well,
matter. Life revolves around these things.
Exactly. It's
yeah,
even
we
in their
don't.
speech.
Yeah, God doesn't revolve around us, but we certainly revolve around Him.
I
Yeah.
mean, people normally use, Jesus' name as a curse word. Um, people will say OMG and things like that. People talk about God more than they.
More than they think about him. It's funny, Ray. Yeah, I saw one clip where Ray Comfort, he's a popular evangelist on YouTube, was having a debate with Lawrence Krauss, a really popular physicist and atheist. And Lawrence Krauss was done with his conversation with Ray Comfort, and he's like, yeah, well, goodbye. And then Ray was like, you know what goodbye means, right? That means God be with you. That's Old English slang for God be with you. And Lawrence was like, no, it is not. It is not. And the other atheists were like, no, it is. And you're making that up. He's like, go look it up. All these atheists out here saying God be with you.
Oh, I'm gonna use that.
Too funny.
I remember, yeah, Neil, that the Grass Tyson guy, he even said that in one of his videos. I used to watch him, although he
I
wasn't
can't
mocking him.
stand them.
Yeah, he is annoying, but in that video, he did recognize, and he's
You
like,
know what
"We
he
know a lot of
said?
good things have come from Christians."
He said if you even see something like a miracle that you can't explain that could be godlike, always deny it and know that there's physics that could explain it, even if we don't have it.
Well, what's that even supposed to mean, though? Like, what does it even mean by a miracle?
Something that you can't explain.
Yeah, see, I'm scared. If I see a miracle, though, I really am worried if it's going to be like, what if it's a demon trying to trick me? I mean, I guess it would depend, but I'm always cautious about that kind of stuff.
I was just thinking about something, John. I was thinking about this subject. I was reading the Bible with my two babies, the older ones, Eli and Enoch, and we were reading the story about when Jesus was walking on the water, and the apostles said, "Oh, it's an evil spirit," and they're calling him a demon in the Greek. I found that interesting how they're basically blaspheming. They're calling Jesus a demon, but it's not actual blasphemy because they're doing it in ignorance, and it was not held against them. I'm sure this story has some kind of instructive meaning. I'm not sure. Maybe I shouldn't even bring it up, but I just found that fascinating that they were able to say something so untrue about Jesus out of fear and confusion, but that it was not counted as a sin against them. It
I think
probably,
it's because God knows their heart, and the Jews, or the Pharisees, I should say, when they were blaspheming God, I think their hearts convicted them.
hmm yeah, I mean, like the Pharisees, they knowingly blasphemed the Holy Spirit. That's obvious, and that's held against them. But I think it may relate just to that many people who are confused by this world, by the storm, the waves of this world. It's obscuring the sight of Christ. And so some people may reject Christ at first, and God is patient with them. God approaches them as Jesus did, and he gives them a chance to see, it is I, and to believe in him.
Yeah, that's still something I really do wonder a lot about. Why God, He seems to have so much patience with some people, and I'll even include myself in that camp. I think God's had a lot of patience with me, and then some people, it's like they get one chance, come over to the truth, and then if they don't take that, that's like their last opportunity. Like for me, I feel like I've had maybe multiple opportunities in my life, or it feels like it at least.
Same with me,
Like
John. I don't want
it feels
anybody
like
to.
it feels like it's like really reaching out to me, and like honestly, I've been given enough chances where I think felt like I almost had to take it,
Hmm. I
because it
understand.
didn't make any sense to me. I was like, if I don't take this, something really bad's gonna happen. I just had this feeling.
Well, I'll have you know, all of you guys, that the hand that I was dealt in this life is not my own doing of being sheltered or having a dad that already knew about the church fathers and told me about it. I can't take credit for any of that. If I had been born in a different household, like John's or Ray's or Ashton's, who knows what kind of person I would have been, guys. I might have been the most evil person. I might have been worse than all of you guys. I can only chalk it up to God's grace and thank Him and beg His mercy and His patience with me, and that He complete this work that He started in me, that He bring me to my perfection so that I don't waste this gift. Because otherwise, I'll be in massive trouble. If I can receive this gift, be sheltered from all these things, be given so much knowledge early on, and then waste it all. So, I want you to know, guys, no person who is given such an easy upbringing like mine could ever look down on anybody else and say, oh, you know, you didn't do this or that. Because I really haven't done anything. I don't know what I might have done, John, if I were in your shoes. If I had actually gone to public school, guys, I was never around girls. I was never even tempted by girls. Not until I got to the internet. So you guys have endured much more temptation. Nolan, do you guys realize how much more impressive it is that Nolan stayed a virgin through public school? I never went to public school. Or Aramis remaining a virgin even until now. I hope it gives you newfound respect for them, and I have so much respect for any of you guys that have kept yourselves pure. It's very difficult because our parents didn't didn't prepare us, and they didn't prepare you for what we were going to go through. They didn't tell us what marriage is. They didn't lend a hand at all in helping us find a spouse, or even just telling us what to look for in a wife. So God is merciful, guys. He knows that we're all in different boats, and He has a different amount of patience and mercy for each person according to their deserts. But patience and mercy are not infinite, guys, by nature, just by nature of what they are. If patience were infinite or mercy were infinite, it wouldn't be patience or mercy anymore. It would just be God condoning sin and just tolerating it. Just saying, it's fine. I'll never punish sin. I'll be infinitely patient. I'll be infinitely merciful. But instead, God gives everybody a limited amount of time, and everybody has to make their choice before it's too late.
So you think that God just gives certain people more breaks than others because He knows they'd have more stacked up against them?
I don't know all the reasoning behind it, John, because it's something beyond our comprehension. Like how God chooses who is going to be born where in what time period, and who is going to be faced with this trial or that trial. Because we know it's a combination of God working things out, but then also Him allowing human beings to do the evil things they do, and to hurt their children. God isn't making them hurt their child. It's just what the parents chose to do. It's very deep. It's beyond my comprehension. That's the judgment. That's why whenever somebody asks these questions like, is this a salvation issue? Man, nothing. I'm not the salvation definer. None of us are. We aren't deciding who's going to heaven and who's going to hell. All we do know is that God gave a law. He told us how things are supposed to be. And once you become aware of that, what excuse will you have if you choose not to do it just because there were other people who never knew God's law? You're not in that extraordinary circumstance, so you can't rely on some extraordinary rescue, some great excuse. You don't have an excuse. You have all the knowledge. Leave all that up to God. He'll be just. He'll be more than just. He'll be merciful. We know He's very, very merciful. There it is, Luke 12. Rahim quoted it. But the one who did not know his master's will, but did do deeds worthy of a whipping, he received a light beating. But the servant who did know his master's will and didn't do it, he got many lashes. There it is, Rahim. Good job reading the scriptures. Oh, that's a good term, Ray. These relationships, a situationship.
What's that mean?
He's saying it's
It
when,
means a temporary relationship. When you don't want to marry somebody, but you want someone to fool around with, you have a situation.
yeah, I'm
And it's
dating
a
What a
them.
term that
terrible
real
word.
people use, that people do.
Well, Aaron was asking me in a call a couple days ago. He was saying, well, since I am already in a relationship with this girl, blah, blah, blah. I know this is hard for you guys to hear. It's hard for everybody, not just you, Aaron, if you're listening. Everybody, guys. I know that you've fallen in love with somebody. I know that you want to fall in love. You want to get married. You want to have a great marriage. And God wants you to, and I want you to. All of that's true. And you can have a great marriage. But you have to understand what marriage is. You have to understand that wanting to marry somebody is not the same as having a relationship with them. There is no such thing as an in between relationship of not quite married, but really wanting to be. That's not a relationship. It's not a marriage until you are married. Then you're married. Then it's a relationship. Don't create a new class of relationship called girlfriend or boyfriend. It's not real. So be cautious. Have enough respect for this other person, this brother or sister, to not require that they have some kind of devotion to you before you're married. Don't do that to them. They're just learning about the faith. They're just now coming out of so much ignorance and realizing what this life is all about. Not just marriage, but the whole life. And so give them time to figure out what they want to do. Give them time to decide if they even want to be a Christian, let alone get married to you. And understand that you were deceived by your parents to think this is normal to just jump into relationships that are not marriage. It's wrong. So do what's right now. Be cautious. I'm not saying that you can never marry that person that you already fell in love with, but just understand you shouldn't have fallen in love with them. I'm not saying your emotions aren't real. I understand they're real, but just don't go any further, and take a few steps back now, and learn about the faith and learn about marriage, and see if it's something you really want to do. That's my advice. All right. Well, it's almost 11. I think I'm going to go to bed, guys. But we had a call. I'll upload it for you.
Good night, Luke.
Good night, everybody. Love you guys. It was good to see you, Yvonne.
Good night. Good to see you too.
Yes. All right, guys.
Good to see you, Luke.
Farewell. Talk to you later.